They did the same study back in 2003, and they basically said there's a 50% chance we're going to hit 2 degrees C by the end of the century. But they just redid their calculations based on updated information. And you'll see that we hit, these are the red lines, we crossed 2 degrees C around 2050. 2 degrees C is an important number. It's the number, the temperature increase that scientists say we better not go above 2 degrees C. And there's a really good book called 6 Degrees, which explains what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 degrees warmer than today means. I'll summarize it for you. 1 degree is really bad because it causes the Arctic to melt, it causes the Antarctic to melt, it causes hurricanes and droughts and everything we're seeing. And we've warmed about 1 degree so far from climate change. 2 degrees is really bad. It's major sea level rise, wiping out of major cities around the world, war, famine, and all that kind of stuff. 3 is the Bible. Don't know how to say it any other way. It's just beginning of the collapse of civilization, collapse of agriculture, certainly collapse of economies. 4, 5, and 6 degrees is sort of, hey, is anybody there? A little Mad Max kind of stuff going on. And 6 degrees is silence. We're basically not around. And we're going to talk about this, but let's understand this graph a little bit better. It says there is a 95, by the way, this graph assumes business as usual, which is what we're doing right now. That means going along, not taking major action to reverse the trends. And you're going to understand why we need to reverse the trends. 95% chance that we will be at 3.5 degrees C, 6 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than today at the end of the century, crossing 2 degrees roughly 2050 or so. That alone is unacceptable. 95% chance. 50% chance that we'll be at 5 degrees C, sort of very close to game over at that point. And a 5% chance that we're at 7 degrees C, which is certainly game over. And keep in mind that it doesn't stop in 2100. You know, so if we're on these paths and we only hit, let's say, 3.5 degrees, we'll be at 5 degrees, you know, at 2120 or something like that, or 2130. So it's 2100 sort of an artificial path. But one thing I have to emphasize, things are going to be getting bad. Well, first of all, they're getting really bad already in places like Australia and certain parts of Africa. It's going to be really bad here in about 10 years in the Southwest. And it's going to be really bad most places in about 2020. And so this is not just, let's not worry about it, hey, not in my lifetime kind of a thing. Certainly we'll see it, our kids will live it, and it's a question about whether our grandchildren will get through it. But talking about parts per million and degrees C, this chart, I might as well have just told you that an asteroid is headed for Earth. And that's really the impact we're talking about. But when I say 500 parts per million, or I say 5 degrees C, no one reacts. No one it's not built into it. We're going to talk about the psychology of climate change a little bit later. But basically, these kind of numbers mean nothing to anyone. So what I tried to do is to translate, to come up with an analogy of what this all means. So we're going to take a look at what does 2 degrees mean to something that we understand in more of our daily life. Hopefully not your daily life, by the way. But so a plus 2 degrees C is about like driving your car into a brick wall at 20 miles an hour. Okay? You're going to be damaged. You're probably going to be hurt. You might get killed. There's a reasonable chance you might walk away, or at least go away in an ambulance, right? 4 degrees C is like hitting your car into a brick wall at 40 miles an hour. You might make it through. Less chance of that. 6 degrees C is like hitting your car into a wall at 60 miles an hour. And by the way, I forgot to mention, no airbags, no seat belts, and all your children and future grandchildren are in the back seat. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. Now let's take a look at some of the data from around the world. Greenland is melting rapidly. Everything in just the last 2 or 3 years, scientists have found that everything they thought is much worse than they thought. Greenland is melting rapidly. We can measure it using satellites that measure gravity, so they can actually see how much ice is there. Water is pooling on the top of of Greenland ice sheets, and then it goes down to the bottom. It lubricates the bottom of the ice sheets, and they flow out to the sea faster. So the IPCC said, oh, there'll be about a 2-foot sea level rise at the end of the century, and they had a little asterisk there. They said, well, we only included 2 of the 3 causes of sea level rise because we weren't sure about how to calculate the third one. Well, the third one is collapse of ice sheets falling off the sides into the water. That is by far the largest piece of sea level rise. And when you add that in, and Jim Hansen, who's one of the leading climate scientists in the world, said he's used the word certain that it will be a multi-meter sea level rise this century. Multi-meters means 6 feet plus. 2 feet, by the way, is really bad. 2 feet is really bad. 6 feet, it's hard to imagine. That means all the major cities of the world are wiped out, and we're talking about this century. The Antarctic. There's the West Antarctic ice sheet over there. It's being held in by 2 glaciers that are, as they say, on thin ice, I guess is one way to say it. These glaciers are, unlike other glaciers in Greenland, which are all on land, a lot of these glaciers are actually in the water, but it's shallow enough that they're actually anchored to the ground under the water. But the problem is the warmer water from the ocean is underneath and it's undermining them, and they can collapse much sooner than people think. And once they collapse, behind them is the entire West Antarctic ice sheet. If that sheet goes, that's about 18 feet of sea level rise, just for that alone. Greenland, by the way, if it melts, is 18 to 20 feet of sea level rise, all on its own. And just to give you an idea what that means, this is if the West Antarctic ice sheet goes. That's what Florida looks like. By the way, Florida is going to look like that in the next couple hundred years, certainly, but this is possible in the next 100 years. Not likely, because this is, again, the predictions are more in the 6 feet range for this century. But again, everything we're learning, it goes faster and faster and faster. Even in the last couple of weeks, the data from the West Antarctic ice, there was articles about how it's melting 4 times faster than they originally thought. So we really don't know, but this is a reality. And by the way, the time to stop buying Florida real estate is now. Not that this is going to happen soon, but as soon as everybody realizes this is going to happen, that's when the price drops, right? I can tell you now this is going to happen. And it's going to become conventional wisdom in a little while, but not cool. It takes a while. It's not a secret, though. And by the way, oceans will rise. This is not prediction. This is historical data. This says at different CO2 concentrations, we're currently around here. This is what the ocean level was. So it says, everyone, the scientists are saying we better stop at 550 parts per million. Now they're saying 450. And actually, Jim Hansen says we have to stop at 350. We're already at 387. He says we can't go above 350. We have to go back. But if we went to 550, that says the sea level was 150 feet higher than today. And that's what's happening. We're already at the current 380. It says it's about 50 feet higher than today. That's where we're heading. The Arctic is melting. The Antarctic is melting. When it's all gone, it's 280 feet higher than today. And it's happened in the past. So it's not like just theoretical. It's happening now. It just takes a long time to happen, but we're letting it happen. We're letting this happen to future generations. Other problems that can happen this century is the Amazon is drying out because of the change in weather patterns. The trees there are not meant to withstand drought. It's supposed to be a tropical rainforest. It's not supposed to be something that gets drought. There were some droughts a little while ago for a couple years in a row. And this is a ship on the Amazon River. They were actually flying water up to villages using helicopters off the Amazon River. That's bizarre. But if a drought goes for 3 to 5 years, then all the trees will burn because they're not designed to withstand a drought. And that will release tremendous amounts of CO2, which will heat up the atmosphere more, which will make essentially the whole Amazon collapse and turn it into savanna. This was not predicted. Again, this is not part of the 2007 IPCC model. They are updating those models now. So if you had to be scared of one thing, there's actually lots of things to be scared of. But if you ask me what's the one thing I worry about the most in the near term, it's the permafrost melting. The permafrost is, as it says, frozen ground around the Arctic that contains organic material. It's old plants, maybe a dinosaur here or there, or something like that. But it's mostly like frozen peat moss, if you think of it like that. And it's frozen, so it hasn't decomposed into CO2 and methane. It contains twice as much CO2 as the entire atmosphere holds. And it is melting now. We really don't know how fast it's melting. We don't know how much CO2 it's giving off. We know it's happening. There's some estimates. It's a lot already. The humans give off about 30 billion tons of CO2 a year, excess CO2. And since methane is 20 times more powerful than CO2 as a heat-trapping gas, it's estimated that the amount given off in the last couple of years might be equivalent to about 1 billion tons of CO2. What's happening in this picture is this is a lake in Siberia. It's a lake formed because of melting permafrost. There's now water underneath. Someone poked a hole in the ice and lit a match.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it? This place is just full of it.